Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Squat Cobbler. I'm Kelly at KELLYTHUO on Twitter and Instagram.
And I am Dr. Mike at Official Pagan on everything. And I apologize in advance to the people from England. You should still like and subscribe.
I don't know what he's talking about, but liking, subscribing is a good thing to do. So we're back talking retro gaming this week, and we have been talking for a bit that we were going to start doing some game reviews and going through some past favorites. And as we begin to look through, say, where do we want to start? Uh, the game that we're going to talk about today came up pretty quick for both Mike and I as an area of interest and passion, and that is um, Another World, which I think is how it was released in Europe and its actual name, but I think upon initial release in America, it was called Out of This World. Uh, but gosh, and how are you going to do in terms of year it was released? Is that something you have on the top of your mind, or is that something that's going to magically appear at the bottom of this video?
Oh, I know it right off the top of my head. It's right there.
Okay, yeah, that was the year. And if you think about that year, folks, that's not the heyday of awesome graphic interfaces and cool,
No.
engaging, immersive games. And that's one of the beauties of this game is that while you don't have 4 million polygons and tremendous shading and all those types of processes, you do have kind of rotoscoped level activity in terms of how the character moves, and done with a few simple polygons, a compelling enough and immersive enough experience that you're not feeling like Atari. You actually do kind of get into this world. It seems to fit. It's a beautiful game, and the gameplay itself is simple and straightforward. You don't need to know 47 million different buttons to go through, but you need to be pretty good at using those buttons to do certain things. So this was originally released in America for the Amiga and the Atari ST. And we've covered before, big Amiga fan, and this was one of my proudest moments as an Amiga owner was to be able to play this game because it was just amazing. It was super fun and engaging. Maybe not the longest adventure game kind of in the world, but worth every minute of it. So, what were kind of some of your first impressions and thoughts, Mike?
So visually, it's a really interesting game. Like you had mentioned, polygon graphics were sort of a thing at this time, but they hadn't figured it out yet. there was a few things going on there. Some of the early wireframe games, like the early Star Wars games and things like that. Then you had some PC games that started getting into like shaded polygons and things like that. To me, they didn't look good. I would have taken a 2D sprite based platformer over those any day. Um, to me, like part of the immersion of a video game, especially of that era, isn't so much using my imagination. And I like text-based adventures and things like that, but I know going into that what I'm getting into and where I'm going with that. Whereas, when I go into an adventure style game like this, I want to see something that looks good. And a lot of these kind of games for me didn't do it. But this game, and I want to say I'd seen this game maybe in like a PC magazine and played it briefly at a friend's house. And it was actually the next game by the same developers that they had done Flashback. Flashback was the one that I really got into, and that made me go back to this one and really get into this. It is a French company, and bizarrely enough, I played both of these games in French. um, totally legal copies that I acquired from someone that happened to be the French versions of the games. So it wasn't until much later that I played them and actually really understood the story for both this and Flashback. But I was with both of them, great graphics for the time. They looked amazing. Um, Especially the shading and everything that was done with them. It made it look like a much brighter color palette than it actually uses based on the graphics cards of the time. It seemed like something that was impossible to pull off the depth of field in the graphics, the color palettes, and things like that. This was also kind of my introduction to what I've heard people refer to as cinematic platformers. on that sort of using the basic platforming mechanics of the games, but with much more detailed characters and backgrounds, much smoother animation, more realistic movement and physics and things like that to your characters. Really enjoyed it. I do enjoy those kind of games, and that's really because of this. And I also think it's really important to note that these are the same people behind another classic game that we all love, Shaq Fu.
Also known for its beautiful backgrounds. So I did not know that.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Clearly not a spinoff of Another World.
I like to believe they all exist in the same universe. Another World, Flashback, Shaq Fu,
Okay.
all in the same universe. So if Shaq Fu had done better, we would have gotten an Avengers style meeting of all of them. Would have been amazing.
Ooh, I don't know. I don't know about that, but yeah, but this one in particular, and it's one of the kind of failings of Shaq Fu, is this one beyond the kind of very initial cutscenes where some what ultimately becomes not necessarily useful information, like, oh, I see you drove your Ferrari, Keith, because that was like one of the few Polygon things that you might not have exactly got, that they were going for a Ferrari, so they wanted to make sure you knew that was a Ferrari he drove up in. So, oh, I see you drove your Ferrari, and so there's a little kind of back and forth
Yeah,
dialogue.
it had more of a Tesla truck kind of vibe to
Yeah,
it.
it was, yeah, and again, ahead of its time, and so there's a little bit of that, but then actually, I mean, that's it for dialogue. That's it for basically anything to read or interact to. All the rest of it is just kind of cruising through this environment. You get to pair up with another alien. So these the aliens that are kind of keeping you prisoner. Apparently, one of them they had a falling out with, and so he is in a cage, and you can put in the cage with him and help break out. And so now you guys are kind of going together. He comes in useful occasionally. As big as he is, you would have thought he'd come in a little more. But yeah, that character's name is actually Buddy. Never indicated in the game really per se, but it's a buddy, and he's a pretty cool sidekick. And but it was just it's all visual storytelling, really. And if you think about some of the indie games, like some of the stuff I talked about on Amazon Prime games now, actually a very similar kind of concept, just obviously a lot more shading, a lot more richness to it. But in terms of the concept, it's the same kind of gameplay, kind of puzzle solving, floating along. But I think particularly for its time, it's an outstanding game.
Yeah, and in addition to, at least for me, this was definitely my introduction to these sort of cinematic platformers. But I would say there's a market now. I don't really know how big of a category it is of these almost, I want to call it like ambient gaming experiences, where it's more passive and it's just more about getting immersed into the environment and the basic mechanics of the gameplay and things like that. I do think there's elements of that. And even though this is much more involved than those games are, I think because the environments in this Flashback and Shaq Fu are all so immersive, I do think you get some of that here too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it went well ahead of all those other ones coming along. So it was kind of groundbreaking in how it delivered the experience, the kind of experience it was delivering, and for my money, one of the best weapons in gaming, because you had this kind of multi-purpose, never running out of ammo gun, which are my favorite kinds of guns.
The only kind of gun you want.
That's right, just infinite ammo. Herschel and the Walking Dead shotgun kind of infinite ammo. And So that's cool. But then it's got three functions. It's got just your standard, boom, I shot you, laser beam kind of deal. Then you can hold it in, kind of do like a double tap kind of thing or something, and you can create a shield, a force field to protect you, which comes in handy, which your enemies can do too. So that creates some complexity. Or you can kind of put the hammer down and deliver a blast that'll knock some walls down and those types of things. So, kind of a nice three function weapon to kind of get you through there. And you don't have to worry about pesky things like recharging it, fighting ammo to reload it. It's just go. You've got
Those unrealistic scenarios that you would run into.
but I liked it a lot. So. And the other part was nice is that so you don't have like hit points in this game, so it's not like, oh, you took a little damage, you'll come back. It's like, nope, they touched you, you're dead. And so the basically at any point you get shot or run into one of these guys, that ends it, and they run you back to the last kind of checkpoint, which mercifully they don't. Um, they're pretty closely spaced apart, so that if you get stuck in a section, you're not having to redo like a massive amount. There's a few places where it could get a little bit irritating, but I thought they did a really nice job in balancing the checkpoints so that, okay, I got knocked out here, but I'm not going all the way back to the beginning of the level or those types of things, which I think increased its enjoyment of playability. It probably shortened it a little bit too in terms of playing time.
Yeah, not, but I agree though, like, and not every game. So this did come out at the time of the early sort of 8-bit console games, which were punishingly difficult. If anybody wants to go back and revisit some of those, this was a time when games, unlike now, where I think you have long campaigns with games, games were just difficult. They weren't as long, but they were hard. You had to actually get good at the game. You had to learn the game, learn how to play the game properly, and get good at it. And this came out during that time, so I'm okay with the length with it. Another thing, so going back to, like you said, getting hit, dying, I remember more so, and I believe it does it in this game too. I think it was more so in Flashback, because that was the one I delved into really first, then came back to this one. I remember in Flashback used to be, the Mario style platforming. You could just jump from platform to platform. Yeah, if you fall into a gap or something like that, you die. In Flashback, if you land wrong on your jump, your character gets hurt, takes a great deal of damage, or even dies. If you jump from too high of a platform to another platform, the impact will kill you, even if you made the jump. So things like that were really interesting additions. And as far as I was aware, really ahead of their time for that time, because I don't remember games being like that. You had the classic hit points, like Kelly said, certain number of lives, certain number of continues, and you just kind of worked around that.
Yeah, which is kind of the nice thing, is that you just can keep plugging away and figure out, continue to work. But you've got to, for both this game and Flashback, there are some bring some of that initial platforming stuff in there where you actually do have to be pretty good, time some things right, do some pretty complex moves to kind of get past some of the things there. But just both of the games are beautiful to look at, really fun to play. And this one, it was kind of just such an efficient delivery of entertainment and visual awesomeness that it seemed like a great one for us to start off with and say, if you don't have Flashback, I know it's available for the Switch, so you should get it for that. They did have some legacy copies out there where you could get a kind of a combination of this plus Flashback, which would be a great.
Did that include Shaq Fu?
It did not. Clearly an error on their part.
Yeah.
Didn't they bury all the Shaq Fu? No, it's a different series. But yeah, well, I'm very unfamiliar with Shaq Fu, so I guess I will have to.
So it's a weird one. I bring it up because it is from the same developers, and that's something that really surprises people. Shaq Fu's weird because at the time, and I remember when it was released, there was a lot of hype around that game, and it's not great, but it was fine. The game was fine. I mean, it was just advertised to death because Shaq is in it. So it just had tons and tons of publicity, which built up an unrealistic expectation of the game. But the game is decent, and it incorporates a lot of the same elements that are in this and in Flashback, but in a fighting game format. So I think really what hurt it is it couldn't match the speed of a game like Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, because you had these more fluid character animations that this team was used to doing, which doesn't really match a fighting game. But it's not a bad game. The game was fine the way it was. Somewhere along the line, and there's actually a few videos about this on YouTube, somewhere along the line, people started using it as an example of a bad game, and that kind of has become the narrative now. But at the time when it came out, the game did fine. Like, it wasn't not successful. It was, just nobody, I don't think anybody was like, Shaq Fu is my favorite game, and nobody would probably compare it to this or Flashback, but it wasn't a hated game at the time. But there was a period for a while where, especially in online reviews and things like that, and it was really a part of the online review culture, particularly in the gaming scene, where sort of angry or negative reviews became a thing for a while, and Shaq Fu just became one of those games that people like to pick on. And now there's a lot of retrospective stuff where they're like, yeah, but the game actually did fine, and nobody really hates the game. It's just more funny to watch people pick it apart. And it even got like a reboot, I believe, for Switch.
Oh, really?
So I don't know how true it is to the original game as far as gameplay or anything like that. I never played it.
Yeah, yeah, you got to kind of recharge your lives. You got to take Shaq to the free throw line. He's got to shoot free throws, and that's like 2-3 hours for him to hit enough free throws to get you there. So it's not worth it. So last episode Mike and I recorded, I kind of maybe teed off on the British a little. Here I'm going after Shaq. Not scared, totally not frightened at all. Totally anticipating.
Punch Shaq just like he'll punch Chuck Garrick.
That's right. Not worried, bring it on, Shaq, because, pretty confident he's not a regular.
Well, just to tie it all together, then our last episode, we also talked about HBO Max. Another premiere coming to HBO Max is the long-awaited sequel to Space Jam.
All the unanswered questions from Space Jam.
For everybody who is just chomping at the bit to know what happened after Space Jam, the movie that was based on a commercial. Everybody was like, what happens next in the saga of Space Jam? We're finally going to find out all these years later. Is that another one you'll be watching at home, or are you going to make it out to the theaters with that?
I might miss that one, to be honest with you. I did actually. Space Jam is pretty popular in the household in terms of it is what it is, but it's kind of fun. But Michael Jordan doesn't get the credit he deserves. And I think he picked the right calling. I don't think he said, I should be an actor or should I be a basketball player. I think he made the right call. Little career advice from Michael there. I'm sure he appreciates it. But he does a pretty solid job in there. And again, and I'm not meaning to pick on you, Shaq, but I'm going to kind of say, I don't know if you have the range of a Michael Jordan. So we'll have to see. Man, I'm just throwing down on the big man.
Next, you're going to make fun of Shaq's music career.
She needs to speak well of the dead. So no. I won't.
That's true. Everybody made fun of Michael Jordan for trying to get into baseball. But there's a lot of other athletes who have tried other careers that are much further removed than just trying a different sport out for a while.
Yep.
Like Shaq. Shaq was an actor. Shaq was a rapper for a while. Shaq tried to get into video games.
And kept on trying.
Yeah, he kept doing other stuff. But if you say Shaq, people know that basketball player.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, so I am probably not going to. It is interesting. They've, and this is always like a frightening conversation for me when it happens, when they start to talk about the sex appeal of comic characters. So, well, we've toned down the female rabbit in this episode, and I was like, yeah, good. Phew, that's.
It's a weird. It's a weird conversation because a few people have brought that up to me. Like, what do you think about them desexualizing the rabbit? And my thing is, and I was the age where I would notice sexualization of characters. I don't remember being into the cartoon rabbit. And even at that age, and again, the appropriate age to be into inappropriate things. And I at no point was like, man, that rabbit's looking good. Never happened. So I think it's one of those things, like if I was in that studio meeting, I'd be like, right, we shouldn't have overly sexualized characters in this kids movie. Also, do you think it's weird that you're noticing that as a human adult?
Yeah, that's kind of the thing. It's like, so who are you worried about here?
Yeah.
Let's see.
Like it's a little bit weird though that you're bringing it up because that means you were watching that. You're like, that's a hot rabbit cartoon.
Yeah, we're gonna need to tone this down.
Yeah. It's like, and I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but Rob Zombie is a vegetarian for anyone who doesn't know, and he does a lot of pro-vegetarian, anti-carnivore advertising and things like that. And he did a campaign with PETA, and he was talking about how ads for chicken, and I'm not making this up, ads for chicken sexualize chicken. That they make you want to have sex with and then eat the chicken looking at the pictures. And I was like, wow, Rob Zombie's got a lot of problems and they're not related to his diet.
No.
Like,
yeah, no.
yeah, I was like, this, if I was like a therapist, I wouldn't even start talking about his food issues or even animal rights or anything like that. Just more like, hey, why do you think that chicken's sexy? Because I don't. And I eat meat. And at no point was I looking at that picture and I was like, yeah, that chicken, man.
That's a looker.
Yeah.
Crispy chicken sandwich.
Yeah. Okay. Like, I think that there is a different issue happening here.
Yeah, I totally missed that.
And that's kind of the way I think about the space. Sure. There shouldn't be overly sexualized thing in kids' movies. Sure. But if you were an adult watching that, and that was your takeaway from the whole movie, and not that's Michael Jordan's house, because really that's the thing that should bother you the most, is the idea that Michael Jordan, the biggest basketball star, I've never watched a basketball game in my life. I knew who Michael Jordan is. Michael Jordan, the biggest basketball star in the world at that time, lives in my house, essentially.
Yeah,
in that movie. Like, that's really the hardest part to swallow of Space Jam for me.
You actually have a few more rooms than he does.
Yeah, I was like, I think my house is a little bit bigger than Michael Jordan's house is in that movie. Yeah. That's the hardest part to get around in that movie. Oh, and really the thing that probably didn't age well is the R. Kelly theme song. So,
doesn't help. No,
yeah.
Not
but if your takeaway from it was the rabbit, just like Rob Zombie, I think there's deeper issues there.
So I hope you've all enjoyed our review of the game Another World.
just like another.
Our laser-like focus on the topic of the video.
Kelly. He started talking about the British. Next thing you know, sexy chickens and
picking a war with Shaq. But all I know is that this is gonna easily be my favorite episode ever, because with just some minor editing, there's this wondrous section where you talk about being into cartoon rabbits and at an age where it was appropriate to be into these things. And I just think with a minor tweak or two in the pacing on that, that's gonna be an outstanding video or audio bump or something. So that'll be great.
I look forward to it. Yeah, people should play this game. You should play Flashback, and if you have extra time, Shaq Fu exists.
Yep. So give it a shot and let us know how it is in the comments. It'd be pretty cool.
I'd start with this and Flashback though. Those are, focus on those.
Yes. Yeah, and yes, I think we're not going into the rest of the content at the end of here again.
And then watch Space Jam 2. Tell us what you thought of it.
Yeah. How hot was that rabbit?
Yeah. If you thought the rabbit was hot and you're really into chicken, let us know in the comments.
All right, we're done. Thanks for watching. Maybe we'll put a time marker or something. This would be a good time. We're kind of done talking about the stuff they said they were going to talk about. You can stay if you want, but I wouldn't recommend it. So,
how much do you like chicken? That's going to determine where you're at on the last 5 minutes of the show.
All right. Really, I feel bad asking people to subscribe now, but give it a if you can forgive us, overlook this last little part, please do give us a like, give us a subscribe. We greatly appreciate it and look forward to visiting with you again soon. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, everybody.